I think a lot of people would agree that Kendrick Lamar has one of the best discographies, not only in hip-hop, but in all of music. And now that Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers has been out for a couple of weeks, I think it's a fitting time to do a full discography ranking of every Kendrick Lamar album, starting off with Section 80 all the way up to Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And for this list, we've actually chosen to disclude Untitled and Mastered, as well as Overly Dedicated, just because they're not actual studio albums, so it didn't feel really right to compare them to these other projects. But let's jump right into it, guys, and let us know your discography ranking for Kendrick in the comments. Number 5, Section 80.
Yeah, so where do we start with this project? I mean, I think there's such a big nostalgic factor that comes with this Kendrick process. And I mean, what I love about this track list is how hungry he sounds. And I also think that these are the, I would say, foundation blocks to his discography.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the subject matter about spirituality and about, progressing as a soul really did start on this album. You could say it did start on, Overly Dedicated as well. It's always been prominent within his music, but I feel as if, this is where he really started to understand, how to create beautiful fucking albums. And if you think about it, you have some of his most iconic songs of all time on this track list. You have ADHD on here, you have High Power on here, you have Rigor Mortis, you have Ronald Reagan Era, you have Kush and Corinthians,
Poor Man's Dreams.
You have just so many underrated tracks on here. So what do you like about this track list so much, and where do you find some weaknesses maybe within the track list?
Well, first of all, I feel like what I love about this is that, like every Kendrick Lamar album, it is a concept record. And from the beginning on Fuck Your Ethnicity, you see that he's kind of talking through this narrator, which is just Kendrick with a low-pitched voice. And he's in this campfire setting, and he's telling people from his neighborhood, let's not let our ethnicities divide us. Let's actually unite. And that kind of sets up the building blocks for the concept of the record. And not only that, I like what you said about how this was the foundation, because on a song like Poor Man's Dreams, for example, there's a line where he raps, since my uncle's was institutionalized, my intuition has said I was suited for family ties. And you'll see that he's kind of planting the seeds for perspectives and concepts that he would end up tackling on To Pimp a Butterfly, where you have a song called Institutionalized, and Family Ties, which is a song he was featured on in 2021. So I guess you kind of get to see Kendrick's full scope and what his purpose is as an artist to kind of be this prophet, at least earlier on in his career. We see that change later on. But like you were saying, some of his most nostalgic tracks here. And I also like the fact that, Kendrick is really wanting to prove that he's one of the best MCs on the rise. And you get that through Rigor Mortis. Not only that, but you also hear that he has this early ear for jazz through the trumpets and saxophones that you would hear on Absol's outro.
Extremely influenced
or Rigor
by
Mortis.
extremely influenced by all these types of jazzy productions that keep you constantly engaged throughout the track list. That's what I like about it too. And I think one of the most underrated aspects of this track list is how well it's aged over time. Like, I find myself going to a song like ADHD so much within Kendrick's discography still, nearly over 10 years later. And I think, yes, you do have your duds within this album. So example, something like, I believe, like No Makeup, like that's definitely not one of my favorite Kendrick songs. And it just goes to show maybe how like tight knit this track list is, where that's maybe the only thing you could pick out of it. And
a couple of misses, but not much.
What are some other misses that you would say are within this track list that kind of make it rank lower on, within the discography itself?
Misses in the track list. I mean, I don't know. I can't really think of anything right now, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know. There's not really that many misses, bro. Like, there's one or two maybe that I don't really revisit. But it's just crazy to see how by the time this album came out, he was still performing in front of like a crowd of 300 people, and now he's selling out arenas. So it's cool to see the progression from Kendrick. And I don't think it's his best concept record or his best written album, but it's cool to see his influence, because he was influenced by 90s West Coast groups like Souls of Mischief, and you hear that kind of through his rhyming techniques and how he's kind of almost interrupting himself with new rhymes for how frantic his delivery is.
Absolutely, and you get some of his most, let's say, impressive showcases of flows and deliveries on a song like Rigor Mortis. The breath control on that song was
insane.
Absolutely impeccable. And I also think that it was a great place for this, to start off with, different aesthetics that you would later come, to see, let's say on GKMC with a song like ADHD. Like looking at ADHD, if you look at the way that song's structured and the way that it sounds and feels, it sounds like something that you could take and put on GKMC in the future. So I do think that this is an essential part of Kendrick's discography. One of my favorite projects of the 2010 decade, and you guys know how big we are on K-Dot. So I mean, ranking this at the bottom of the discography does not mean anything. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, this is still a classic in my opinion.
It would be a lot of rappers' best album.
Absolutely.
You know what I
That's
mean?
for sure.
And yeah, we're just going to be giving Kendrick a lot of fucking love on this video. Like, let's be honest about it. But let's move on to number 4 on our list. And we have Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And I don't know about you, but it was kind of tough for me to rank this so early on.
It was.
But, you know, we've had a lot of time to digest it. I've listened to it over 25 times at this point. And, you know, after having weeks to live with it, I love what it represents to his discography because obviously it is his most personal body of work. And tell me if you agree with this. I feel like it's the album that transcends the medium of music the most because it literally feels like a stage play, and there's various elements that point towards that.
That's
For example, the reoccurring motifs of the tap dancing. Then you have the narration from Whitney and Eckhart Tolle. You have the melodramatic piano chords. You have the theatrical dialogue between him and Taylor Page on We Cry Together. You have the fact that it's separated into 2 discs that could also be viewed as 2 different acts. You also have Kendrick rapping almost to himself as if it's a monologue, which in theater you would refer to as the soliloquies. So I feel like this is an album that could be adapted into a real play. And let me ask you this. Do you think that if he were to perform, let's say, one album from start to finish on stage, this would be the best one to do?
Yeah, maybe. And listen, I've seen Damn, as I said, as well, and we'll talk about Damn, you know, later on in the discography ranking. But I think what's so cool about this album is that, you know, Kendrick took that format of the double disc and he absolutely murdered it. Like, to be able to carry 19 tracks on a soundtrack
18.
now, 18, my bad, in 2022 is extremely tough. And you could see how, you know, the track list is perfectly split with the 9 and 9. And I also love the transitions within the track list because this is a constant evolution of Kendrick's mind state, you know, as he's going through this healing process. And for Kendrick to also get off of his pedestal that, you know, he was put on early on into his career because people saw him as the savior of rap is extremely vulnerable and is an extremely risky move within his discography as well. Because looking at the way that he was able to play this, if he would have gone with those themes and messages of still being rap savior and still being on that pedestal, would that have gotten stale for the content matter? Would it still have felt as, you know, let's say refreshing to listen to this new Kendrick record? And I think that the approach of really taking it from a selfless perspective was the best move he could have done with it. And not only that, but, you know, I love how quirky some of the rap performances are on this album and the new flows that he's experimenting with that we haven't seen from him.
United in Grief, for example.
Worldwide Steppers. Yeah. You know, like you have some rap performances that are almost alien-like. And I also love how this is a different type of writing from Kendrick, you know, to Pimp A Butterfly, GKMC, Damn, it's very left open to your own interpretation. You have to dive deep and you have to find all these types of different meanings and you have to be able to do it. But with this one, it feels like the writing is more clear cut because then there's more of a personal connection to the listener. So do you see this ever, you know, maybe cracking the top 3, let's say, you know, going forward with this?
You know, my experience with Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is very interesting because the way that I view myself kind of enjoying and consuming the album, I feel like it's as if I'm walking and visiting a museum and appreciating this incredible art piece from afar. You know, it's like looking at a disturbing Van Gogh painting, and it's an uncomfortable experience, and it's something that I love to admire on occasion because that's kind of the way that I feel about all art that is challenging, and this is a very challenging album, and it forces you to hold up a mirror to yourself, and I love the fact that it's about Kendrick's personal progression, and you see that through the split of disc 1 and 2. Disc 1, his thoughts are sporadic. He's kind of rapping all over the place, and he's kind of tap dancing around his problems. But then once you go to disc 2, you see that he's articulating himself way clearer and his thoughts are more simplified. You know what I'm saying?
And I also think that this album has the most modern approach out of any other Kendrick album. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you because you're also going to get, let's say, songs like Silent Hill that, you know, kind of take the concept of trap music and kind of, you know, push it forward a bit more with the production. I also love the new cadences and flows that he experiments with on there. And I also like how, you know, he wasn't afraid to, you know, just jam up, you know, all kinds of features together. The feature list was
and you know what's cool about
calculated.
Silent Hill? I saw this online that apparently that noise that you hear in the production, that's actually from an old 007 video game.
Okay, it sounds like a bullet shot.
It sounds like a bullet shot.
Okay, fine. I actually never. Okay, cool fact. But all right, so that's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Ranks at number 4. But let's go on to number 3, and this is Damn. You know, this was a 2017 masterpiece and was a big fucking moment for the industry back in 2017. And I remember when this dropped, We had initially gotten the Hard Part 4, and then Kendrick tells everyone to get your shit together for, that April date. And then after that, you get Humble with that music video. You're drawn in already because you know what type of Kendrick, you know what type of time Kendrick is on. Then you get this album and you're completely fucking confused. I think that's the first emotion that I had going into Damn, was I was completely bamboozled because I didn't understand the sonic direction he was going on with this. I was young too, so I was expecting a To Pimp A Butterfly Part 2 or a GKMC Part 2. I wasn't expecting this type of track list. And then you start to figure out, all the complexities within this, track list and all like the sort of world eye views that, Kendrick's bringing on to this track list and how he's explaining them through personal emotions, like fear, like pride, like DNA, like just all these things that kind of make the human, the human soul, and that coming full circle within the track list. Plus, once you find out that this track list is not in chronological order, it makes you want to go back and re-listen to it. So that was a cool Easter egg that I really did appreciate.
Yeah.
And I think that this is one of the Kendrick albums with the most replay value for me, if I'm being honest.
100%. And this is the album from Kendrick that has grown on me the most over time, I would say.
You didn't like this at first.
I didn't like it at first. Like when I was hearing records like Loyalty and Love, I'm like, damn, like is Kendrick selling out? Why is he going this commercial route? But the more I listen to them, I'm like, wow, these are actually good standalone records and they fit into the actual concept of the album. And to me, this is Kendrick's Apocalypse. This is Kendrick's Apocalypse album in the sense that it kind of feels in tone very desolate and hopeless.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like he's preparing for the end of days and that he doesn't know if his next life form will end up in paradise. He doesn't know what the future is for him. He doesn't know if his past sins and grievances will affect him, negatively after he moves on from this life form. And apart from that, I just love the aspect of duality sprinkled throughout the track list. The idea that you can play this album from track 1 to track 14 and make one meaning out of it, or you can play it in reverse order from track 14 to track 1 and get a totally different meaning out of
absolutely.
it. Not only that, but there's more duality in the sense of a song like Pride, where he's playing with his vocal pitch and from line to line. So in one line, he's kind of rapping in this high pitch, and that's kind of to symbolize his ideals. And then when he's rapping in the lower pitch, that's his actual action. So it's kind of showing you the split there. Not only that, but there's also duality in the song titles. For example, Love and Lust or Pride and Humble.
Exactly. And I also love how Kendrick does tackle different perspectives on this album. Example, like going on to a song like Fear. He explains the concept of fear through relating to flashbacks that he that he lived through at different points within his life. So example, when he was a child in the first verse, he's tackling the perspective of his mother, talking about, if you get those Jordans, dirty, I'm going to smack you, don't tell anyone he's staying here, don't go fuck on anyone. Like just kind of like it's showing you, what Kendrick was worrying about at that, young age. And then Kendrick turned 17. And then after that, you get the second verse. And now Kendrick's worrying about different stuff. Like example, like having to go to, the dope house to pick up some stuff and, getting shot. Or maybe, the colors that he's wearing are representing a different thing. And then at the age of 27, for the third one, you're getting a different type of perspective where Kendrick has achieved, some of the highest, peaks that you can in life. And now what type of stress does that bring you? Not wanting to buy a Lexus anymore because, you're afraid your money's going to running out. You're afraid you're going to lose your creativity because there's certain energies in your life that are going to fuck with you. Not only that, but I think that the storytelling cuts on this album are fucking incredible.
Duckworth is one of the best stories in hip-hop history.
Absolutely. Like, that's crazy how he also connects it and ties it into the actual album concept. And then something like Blood. A lot of people don't necessarily revisit that song too much. It's not really a song. It's like, the intro to the album.
Love
but it's super, super important to what the concept of the record is because the old lady represents God. Kind of how, Kendrick takes different people and different narratives and stories in his albums and always portrays them as different people, but at the end of the day, it always ends up being God. Example, on How Much a Dollar Cost, the homeless man was God. So that was cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of biblical imagery sprinkled throughout as he kind of tackles the book of Deuteronomy. And what's interesting, too, is that I feel like, yes, DNA is a very popular song, but that might be his best ever mic performance. If you're listening to the double time flow that he has in the first verse, and then how quickly he's rapping on that second verse, it's fucking exhilarating. And he's literally rapping 4 words per second, and every line is mesmerizing. For example, these are the times, level number 9, look up in the sky, 10 is on the way, sentence on the way, killings on the way. Like from the wordplay to everything, lyrically, he's really on a top fucking level here. He's on Mount Olympus, and it's just amazing to see what he kind of carved together and how meticulously this album was crafted.
Absolutely, super tight track list. But okay, so you guys know where we're at right now with the discography ranking. There's obviously two big elephants in the room, GKMC and Pimp A Butterfly. But Lou and I were doing this discography ranking, and we're like, you know that Lou's, number one is GKMC minus Pimp A Butterfly. But we spoke about it, and I think we're gonna have to have a 1A and 1B here because, to be honest with you, when it comes to Pimp A Butterfly and GKMC, they're on a very similar level, and they both strive in different track lists. So for our number one position, we have both the Pimp A Butterfly and GKMC. There's no number two. It's literally tied for both of them.
Two of the best albums of all time.
Absolutely. Like when you look at it from an unbiased standpoint, I genuinely do think that they both strive in different areas that the other can't, let's say. And I mean, if you had to ask me, obviously I prefer Pimp A Butterfly, but if someone would tell me that GKMC is the number one, I would obviously agree with them. But let's start off with Pimp A Butterfly. I think starting off the concept of the record is super important because this is one of Kendrick's rawest albums of all time. Like the pain that you feel throughout the Pimp A Butterfly is extremely emotionally jarring, and I think that one of the biggest things for Kendrick here was bringing himself down to a soul level, really bringing himself off of that GKMC high and really showing you a different perspective.
And nobody expected him to do that.
Absolutely not, and this was super inspired by him touring in Africa and the perspectives that he was gaining in there. So what do you think is the most impressive part of Pimp A Butterfly, and why does it connect with you so much as a listener?
Yeah, I think it's just the epitome of the perfect concept record, and I think that when you're looking at Kendrick's discography, it's definitely his most multi-layered album, and the album, from beginning to end, is filled with metaphors, even from the album title to Pimp A Butterfly, and I don't want to go into it too much, but just that title to Pimp A Butterfly and what it represents and how there's different metaphors for the cocoon, the caterpillar, and the butterfly, and how he is both, the caterpillar and the butterfly, and how he emerges out of that cocoon. If you really, go into the album and discover that, it's mind-blowing, and I just love how much connective tissue there is from song to song, and how I believe starting on the song All Right, you get to hear the beginning of a poem that ends up being finalized on Mortal Man, where he's having that conversation with Tupac, and it's really incredible to see what he put into here and how he took this jazz soundscape and infused it with modern sounds. I think that it's really one of the best showcases of an artist that could have went a commercial route but decided to go on a totally different stratosphere. And I also think that even the interludes are so meaningful. For example, the song For Sale is genius because he's being lured by a girl named Lucy, which also represents Lucifer, and he's kind of personifying the music industry and how he might get aid for his family and he might get riches for as long as he lives, but the cost is selling his soul. Yeah. Is that really worth it?
And I also love the storytelling cuts on here. I think that when it comes down to the storytelling, again, like spoke about it on Damn, but this is another super strong showcase. I mean, even going on to Mortal Man, that was fucking genius. How all of the connective tissue of the track list, comes to a final point and halt at the end of the track list. But even how much $1 costs, being, the idea of looking at a man and understanding that he's on the same playing field as you, and who knows who you're talking to at the end of the day. Because Kendrick was kind of, I would say, he was kind of distant with the homeless man because he felt as if he was doing too much and he was begging too much, and then the homeless man then says a biblical reference, and then after that reveals at the end of the song that he is indeed God, and maybe that $1 just costed you a place in heaven. And I find that so genius because that also explains the butterfly effect, how one small action and decision could possibly change, your life forever, and you won't necessarily realize it until those events have transpired. I also love how confident he is in this album with certain cuts. Example, on something like Hood Politics, establishing his dominance on the West Coast, making people understand that he is the Mecca and that he is the only one that's able to do this. Even going back to the Tupac poem, I mean, has that concept ever been done before? Like, listen, at the time of this recording, I can't think of a hip-hop record that has done so, but just having that poem knitted all the way through and having it come full circle was genius in itself. And the production styles on here are fucking mesmerizing. Some of the best production in his whole discography. I do think it's his best produced album, to be honest with you.
I think I can agree with that for sure.
And all the live jazz instrumentation just makes it for such a beautiful experience. And there's always something to gain out of Pimp A Butterfly.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's low-key my favorite album of all time.
Let me ask
too.
you this. Do you think that there there's a song on here that is, let's say, the most crucial to the album, because I think one of them that maybe gets overlooked is Mama, because
Absolutely.
that track is so important in terms of Kendrick going back to his roots and knowing that, yes, there is now distance between himself and Compton or himself and Africa, but at the end of the day, he can't run away from his problems. He can't run away from that survivor's guilt. He has to face it head on, and then that reaches a climax on a song like You, where he literally puts you on the scene, where you hear these bottles clinking together and you hear the pain that he has, where he feels like he could have done more to save his friends and get them out of that bad environment, but he couldn't at the end of the day.
And I think that's what's emotional, jarring about the album, is that you almost feel like you're feeling Kendrick's torture.
Yeah.
You know, he feels like a tortured soul throughout, and he's finding peace and comfort throughout the track list, and he's looking at things in different perspectives. So that's the Pimp A Butterfly. But let's get on, to like, let's say the 1B or 1A, whatever you guys want to call it. Let me know in the comments section, which album do you find better, GKMC or Pimp A Butterfly? Unbiased, what do you think is the better track list? But I think what's so cool about Good Kid, M.A.A.d City is that I think it's maybe the most timeless in his catalog. I feel as if this is maybe aged, the best. I think that not that Pimp A Butterfly or Damn hasn't been aging with grace, and I love those track lists and the accessibilities there, but it's just, when you think of Kendrick Lamar, you think of Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, and I also do think it's that breakthrough for him. It was really that album that solidified who he would become, and to be able to even top that with the Pimp A Butterfly is even more impressive. So let me ask you, do you think it's his most cinematic album in approach?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just looking at the album cover, he titles it a short film by Kendrick Lamar, and I think that, to go back to the comparison of To Pimp A Butterfly, I think that To Pimp A Butterfly strives more as an art piece, whereas I feel like Good Kid, M.A.A.d City strives more as a musical achievement, and I'll tell you why. I feel like when it comes to music and albums in particular, to me, the most rewarding component is that replay value and that accessibility. And when I want to go and listen to an album, I want to be able to play it time and time again, day after day, year after year, and that's what that album has provided for me. But besides replay value, because that's subjective, he literally balances social commentary with commercial accessibility so fucking well. And I think that when you're looking at just the way that this album is structured, it's genius, because it feels like the Pulp Fiction of hip-hop, where he has a non-linear narrative being told. And I think that when you're looking at the production as well, when you're looking at, let's say, beats like Money Trees, where you have DJ Dahi who reversed this beach house sample, where you have these birds chirping, you really get to get a good taste of the atmosphere. And I think that you have Kendrick's most vivid imagery as well. Going back to a song like The Art of Peer Pressure, you literally feel like you're in the backseat of that white Toyota with Kendrick and his friends going through that home invasion. And I think that what's also so important about this album is that he is talking from the perspective of being an impressionable teenager, and he's targeting impressionable listeners who can get a message about pulling the trigger on your own decisions and not being trapped by your environment.
Yeah, and it goes back to this full concept that I feel as if is prominent within all of his discography is, the butterfly effect, making those really crucial decisions that don't seem too big in the moment, but that will keep you going for time and time again. And I think that you also see some of the biggest victory laps on this album. Example, something like Compton, what that means for Kendrick coming from Compton and having a song with Dr. Dre and taking that victory lap not only showed dominance, but it showed maturity with his writing, and it showed where he's able to take this. And just to be able to include yourself in that conversation is another achievement on its own. And I also love the array of different songs that you're getting on here. There's not a single song that sounds the same, and I think that's something that we could say for all Kendrick albums. But example, like Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe and, let's say, Backseat Freestyle, those are not supposed to be on the same track list, but somehow he makes it work, and they're completely different rap songs. Even, let's say, something, like Swimming Pools in contrast to M.A.A.d City, like there's all these types of different emotional peaks and valleys throughout the track list that keep you invested. And as you were saying about that non-linear order to the track list, I think that's so important too, because like what it did for Damn, it makes you want to go back to the album and actually piece it together.
Like a puzzle, bro.
Exactly,
Yeah.
And that feels like a challenge in itself. So let me ask you, man, top 3 on GKMC.
Top 3, so tough to go give a top 3. Money Trees is definitely an all-time hip-hop song. Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, just because I think that it's that moment that Kendrick has that spiritual rebirth. And then my third track would have to be... There's so many, bro.
I think you'd put
Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe, just because it's probably my most listened to. But one thing, that I want to say before I ask you about your top 3 is that I feel like Kendrick really was a magician on this album in the sense that he tricks the audience for their own good, and he does this by packaging a song like Swimming Pools as if it's a party banger, but deep down it's a song about alcohol abuse. And I think that's what's amazing about this album, is that it's officially the highest charting album in the sense that it spent the most weeks on the Billboard 200 chart, 500 weeks to be exact, and yet a lot of people, yes, are listening to it for the vibes and the mood, but deep down, you're still getting that message delivered to a mass fucking audience, which to me is the most genius thing an artist has maybe ever done in terms of the way they're packaging their music and art. But give me your top three.
Top three, okay. Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, absolutely. Money Trees for sure, and then I would say maybe Compton. I think
Compton in the top three.
Yeah,
wow.
I think it's it's my top three. I don't think, like, subjectively speaking,
Yeah,
it's a
for
top
sure.
three. But I've gone to that song so many different times, and I also think that you have one of the best deluxe albums ever with this fucking album. Like, going back to that "Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe" remix with Jay-Z, like, that was such an impressive rap performance by Kendrick, and he absolutely bodied Hove. So that was another one.
Did he body Hove?
He bodied Hove. Absolutely. Come on, bro. Go listen to those verses again. Even something
He got him, but like I don't know if he bodied him. Like Hove still held his own, bro.
Go listen to those verses.
Also, the Recipe remix too.
That's one of my most played songs off of the whole track list. So you have a lot of replay value within this track list, and I do think that, you know, when I look back at my Kendrick Lamar listening experience, this was the album that solidified it.
Yeah, and I think it also revitalized the West Coast hip hop scene, because before Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, the last big impactful album that I could think of would be The Game's documentary, which came out in 2005. So it was cool to see him kind of have these gangster rap elements sprinkled throughout the track list, but he kind of provides
a different perspective,
a flipped narrative on them, and kind of makes us understand the psychology of gang life and how it's almost, you know, rooted into you when you're kind of, you know, raised amongst that lifestyle. Because Kendrick has said in an interview that he literally witnessed his first murder at 5 years old. And that's what's also very jarring and very, I would say, very realistic about this album, is that it's semi-autobiographical in the sense that, for example, a song like Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, that's based on true events.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what's so amazing about the track list, is that you feel that genuine approach throughout the whole writing form. So guys, let us know in the comment section, what is your official ranking? If you guys were to look at NFR's official ranking, at number 5 we have Section 80, number 4 Mr. M.A.A.d and the Big Steppers, number 3 is Damn, and then after that our 1A and 1B is GKMC at the Pimp A Butterfly, definitely on the same level. So thank you guys so much for watching all of this video. We really appreciate you. And listen, we've done a ton of Kendrick Lamar content on the channel. Not only that, but we did do a live album reaction to Mr. M.A.A.d and the Big Steppers. So if you guys want to go check that out, the link to our Patreon plan is in the description. We're doing them every single week to the hottest releases of the year. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.